The Sasquatch Gang was written and directed by the guy who was the assistant director in Napoleon Dynamite, so expect that kind of humor going forward. Even on the front of the poster, it claims that Napoleon fans will never admit it, but Sasquatch is funnier. So is that true? Let's find out. This movie is split into chapters, with each one following a different character in the story. Chapter 1 is Gavin and the Fortean Wilderness. Here we meet Gavin and his two best friends, Hobby and Maynard. These guys are nerds. There's no way around it. Their favorite pastime is to LARP with foam swords to Lord of the Rings music. Gavin's neighbor, Zerk, and his friend, Shirts, come over to make fun of them and beat them up for being nerds, I guess. Shirts is probably my favorite character in this whole movie, by the way. Even though his name is Shirts, he's never wearing one. And there's a part later on where we see him with his family, and of course, no one's wearing a shirt. It's dumb, but that's what we're working with here. Well, back to Zerk and the fight. When things get out of hand, Gavin shuts it down, saying they need to conserve their energy for a hike to Deer Cliff Falls. For some reason, this location interests Zerk and gives him an idea. Now we see that Gavin also has an obsession with Bigfoot. My kind of guy. He's watching some documentary about the beast hosted by Dr. Artemis Snodgrass, played by Carl Weathers, who seems to be the leading researcher in all things Squatch. Anyway, some guys come over to borrow a tape, because Gavin has so many movies that he started a side business as a rental store. Anyway, the guys borrow the Bigfoot doc and they're on their way. Just in time, too, because Gavin has to get to Deer Cliff Falls. He meets his friends there and another girl, Sophie, who we'll learn about in a minute. They're wandering around the woods, and Hobby slips and falls into a giant turd, with footprints all around it. The only logical explanation that the gang can come up with is Sasquatch.
Who?
They head off to the police to make a report, but are stopped at the trailhead by the town bully Shane and his lackeys, who are the two guys that rented the tape from Gavin earlier. They tell him about the Bigfoot prints, and Shane doesn't believe him. So they make a little bet. If the prints are there, Gavin gets his ninja star. If they're not, Shane gets his entire video collection. Not really a fair trade in my book, but, I mean, what's Gavin got to lose? He knows the prints are there, so he agrees. And the group takes off to the police department to file a report.
We shot at Deer Cliff Falls and we found a number of large tracks.
It's assigned to Officer Calcutt, who seems to be more into this kind of stuff. He goes to check out the prints for himself, and sure enough, they're there. He calls in the news and Gavin gets interviewed, and even gets his face on the front page of the paper. The story is blowing up, and eventually we learn that Dr. Artemis Snodgrass is coming to town to investigate for himself. Now on to Chapter 2, Zerk and his friend Shirts. Zerk gets a visit from a debt collector, informing him of unpaid charges to his credit card. Back in 1999, he bought a burger and never paid it off. So for 6 years, they've been trying to reach him, but he just ignores it. Now he owes $1,400 for that burger, and they're here to collect the debt. Obviously, Zerk doesn't have that kind of cash, so they inform him if he doesn't come up with the money by Monday, the bank is going to repossess his most prized possession, his car. Zerk blows the guy off and lights the paperwork on fire, but that doesn't change anything. He needs to find a way to come up with that money. Zerk and Shirts think about what they need to do. They could raise and sell chameleons, but that takes too long. Zerk makes a $50 bet that he could walk on water, and guess how that goes. There's really only one way a guy like Zerk could make money. We see him wearing a wrestling mask, so I can only assume he robbed someone. But who? Well, we'll figure that out later. For now, they have to celebrate spending all their money. but now they only have 77 bucks left. That's when it picks up where Gavin's story started. He goes over and beats him up and learns about Deercliff Falls. But this time, we hear his idea. People buy all kinds of stuff on the internet, right? Why not make a fake Bigfoot encounter, cast the prints, and sell them online as genuine Sasquatch footprints for all the money they'll ever need?
Sasquatch dumpling.
Now on to chapter 3, which is all about Sophie. This whole movie, all the bullies have been making fun of Sophie for her weight, and I don't really get it. She's not fat at all, but nonetheless, it's messing with her. We see that she works at a video rental store, and Gavin's there to rent Clash of the Titans. Awkward teenage flirting ensues, and in the end, Sophie gives Gavin her number. They go on a date with Gavin showing her how to sword fight. Then they head off to the arcade. This guy really knows how to charm a lady. While he's playing Street Fighter 2, she gets pretty bored and wanders off to play skee-ball. Shane goes up to her on a bet that she wouldn't kiss him, and she doesn't. He is a ringer at skee-ball, though. The next day, Sophie's trying on clothes, and she thinks she looks like a tree trunk. So she goes to her uncle, who's an orthodontist, to get her mouth wired shut, just so she can lose some weight. Pretty extreme, and what a crappy uncle to allow you to do that. Next, we see Sophie at work, and now Hobby is there to rent Clash of the Titans, hoping he can land a date with Sophie like Gavin did.
Yeah.
But it doesn't work. She's just not interested in him like that. Frustrated, he runs away, leaving a little pink ring on the counter. Just then, Zerk comes in wearing the mask. So this is who he robbed. A small-town video rental store? You're gonna make a killing there, bud.
Is this some kind of joke?
Chapter 4 is a quick one. Zerk and Shirts make the footprints and the fake poop in the woods, and we see how close they were to getting caught. Once the gang leaves, they make their casts and get ready to sell them on eBay.
Here with my colleague, Dr. Jokum, collecting footprints of the mysterious beast.
Chapter 5 is when things really start to hit the fan for the Sasquatch Gang. First, Maynard is grounded, so he's out for a little bit, making Hobby the third wheel. They go for some laser tag, with Napoleon Dynamite himself making a cameo. Inside, Hobby shoots Sophie on purpose to get her out of there, and the boys take over for a win. The night continues like this, with Hobby getting tossed aside for Gavin's new crush. Finally, Artemis shows up in town to authenticate the footprints and scat. Zerk is worried that this is going to ruin his plans, because obviously an expert is going to know it's a hoax. Then no one will buy their casts. So they rush over to destroy the evidence. But when they get there, well, we only see his reaction, and it doesn't look good. Chapter 6 is all about Hobby, and we see things from his perspective. He was at the arcade when Sophie and Gavin were there as well. When Shane got all those tickets at skee-ball, Hobby came in and swooped him up to get that little pink ring. We see his side of the story as he rents Clash of the Titans, which seems to be a bit exaggerated.
I don't like spending my time with discussing fat bodies.
In his mind, he was the first to find the poop. He knew it was a Sasquatch first, and Gavin never even mentioned Hobby in the news. So he comes up with a plan to get back at him. He goes to the site in the woods and tears it all up, destroying all evidence of a Sasquatch. Chapter 7, the final countdown. Everyone heads over to Deercliff Falls for Dr. Snodgrass to authenticate the footprints. Before heading out, the bullies remind Gavin of their bet, and Maynard and Sophie join in. But Hobby's a no-show, still mad about being the third wheel. Everyone gets to the site and are surprised to see that it's been destroyed. I guess the yellow caution tape didn't do its job.
Someone broke through my yellow tape.
But Artemis, being the ever-hopeful researcher, thinks that Bigfoot himself destroyed the evidence. And I guess he ate the poop. Gross. Just then, someone sneezes, and they find Zerk behind a tree. Thinking he ruined all this, they arrest him on the spot. and everyone starts heading home. But our heroes hang back for a bit, and the bullies take this time to collect their debt. A fight breaks out, but this time Shane knocks out Sophie. Gavin grows some balls and fights back. But it's 3 against 1. Not gonna work out so well. Maynard comes back to see the fight, and he runs to go get help. It's not looking good for Gavin as he gets a giant atomic wedgie. But then, Hobby shows up, armed. Now things are a little bit more even, and eventually Gavin gets the upper hand. The cops come and the bullies go running, but Sophie's still passed out, and Gavin thinks that a kiss could bring her back. And it doesn't, at least at first. She does eventually come to, and Hobby explains that after he destroyed the tracks, he knew that Shane would come to try to get his videos, and he figured Gavin would need his help. The two make up, and all is right with the world. But there's still no evidence. That's not until Gavin remembers that Hobby doesn't shower much, and he was the one to fall into the poop. Sure enough, there's some left in his hair. Dr. Snodgrass takes a closer look, and after a careful examination, he can tell it's the real deal. A happy ending. Gavin and his friends all LARP in the park. Zerk gets released from jail as there's no evidence, and he decides that the only chance he has at keeping his car is to enter it into the demolition derby. It's the fastest car in town, so no way he could lose. And it's instantly destroyed. And that was the Sasquatch Gang. Was it better than Napoleon Dynamite, as the poster suggests? No, and I don't even really like Napoleon Dynamite that much, but it wasn't bad either. The movie did genuinely make me laugh at times, and it was entertaining enough. Obviously, I would have liked for there to have been a real Sasquatch, but they didn't even hint at that being the case. No howls at the end, no tree knocks, it was a hoax the whole time. If you're in the mood for a teenage coming-of-age comedy in the exact same vein as Napoleon Dynamite, then just watch Napoleon Dynamite. But if you've seen that movie too many times, move on to the Sasquatch Gang. It's a good time. I give it 2.5 shirts out of 4.
I'm gonna go eat now. You can either stay here if you want, or I can come by later. My mom says you can't eat any of our food anymore.
What are you guys having?
Hot dogs and Cheetos.
Crap!